Okay. That's good stuff, by the way. I'm enjoying this a lot. James, you speak a lot about activation and how each of us can access the higher frequencies. Can you speak to the process of activation and how it, comes about?
Yes, certainly. It is a very important topic and one that is particularly close to my heart. You see, you can be born into a body, educated at the finest universities, live the perfect life from the biological perspective, but if the access to the universal currents or living truth is shut down, if these currents are not flowing through and into your human consciousness, then you are not really incarnate, at least not as you were intended by First Source, your Creator. Your incarnation is not complete, in other words. So this is a very important subject, as we have billions of people who are incarnated upon this planet, but are operating at a diminished spiritual capacity. With our eyes and ears, we perceive but a small portion of our universe, the light and sound frequencies that our biological circuitry perceives and processes as fractional. And when you add space to that equation, it is infinitesimally small. It was understood that the human instrument would have its limitations, but like all things that are designed by our Creator, there are compensatory factors, which in this case is the human emotional system. Our emotions are what connect us to the broader universe and the energetics that radiate from First Source. When one lives a love-centered life, practicing the 6 art virtues to the best of their abilities, in the smallest nooks and crannies of their life, they unfold around themselves an antenna. This antenna is etheric. In other words, it exists in a state of energy that our eyes and ears do not detect, and is designed like a finely tuned instrument that both receives and transmits the radiations of the higher frequencies from First Source. So this antenna surrounds our human instrument, occupying the same space as our body. And yet, because it's composed of light frequencies of a high nature, it's not bound to the reality and limitations of a third dimension, like our physical body, for instance. When our hearts are relaxed, loving and understanding, appreciative, trusting, the etheric antenna becomes receptive, like a flower opening its petals to the sun. If our heart is anxious or troubled or angry or tumultuous, the same antenna, similar to the way a sensitive plant closes its petals at sunset, passes into disorder, and its fine-grained connection to the higher frequency radiations of First Source are cut off or diminished. This etheric antenna, from a biological standpoint, is anchored in the 7 glands of the endocrine system, which act as receptors that translate the higher frequencies of the spirit domain to the body and mind, so that the mind can process the encoded information and the body can act upon it.
It's the same thing as the 7 chakra system?
Yes. Now, when people express anger or hatred, especially over time, their antenna can be damaged, or more precisely, its sensitivity is diminished, causing a vicious cycle, because at some level they realize that they're not receiving the ultrafine perceptions, which is their birthright. It is precisely these ultrafine perceptions that activate the individual. It's important to note that this antenna is never damaged from external emotions. In other words, negative emotions directed at you or others from an external source. Instead, it's diminished only by your own emotions of hatred, anger, frustration, and resentment. So you see, your spirit's presence in your life is directly proportional to this etheric antenna's well-being. It's a very delicate, wondrous, even miraculous facet of the human instrument and its bond with spirit. And as this antenna is unfurled, awakened, activated, strengthened, utilized, and secured, it broadcasts the incoming frequencies of light and sound, or the higher frequency radiations of First Source, to the energetic field around you, bringing you a more complete awareness of the multidimensional world in which you live. Now, this luminous field that surrounds you is not an island anymore. As I said, the islands are rising up as a continent of consciousness, and this continent is the collective entity I spoke of earlier.
So what is the activation then?
The higher self, working in conjunction with spirit, is always the activator. It instructs the human instrument on the fundamental truths of the 6 heart virtues even before the individual can read or speak. These are innate understandings that derive from the shared pool of wisdom that is the living truth, and this pool of wisdom is the very same that angels and enlightened beings draw from. This is the access that every student of spirit seeks. Once it is found, it becomes your own. Once it is found, you realize that the circuitry of the heavens, of the material galaxies, star systems, and right down to the planet and your own human instrument, they are all aligned in a coherent design that makes the access to the shared pool of wisdom possible. The only thing that you need to do is to activate the etheric antenna transmitter, which is another way of saying listen to your heart, and then sustain and expand this activation by living a love-centered life.
It almost sounds too simple.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is simple. There is no complexity here because it is natural. It is with the grain, where the friction of effort is removed from the task, and because of the incoming energetics of our time, the task is even simpler. I understand that there are many complex techniques related to posture and breathing and mantras and visualizations and so forth. I don't discount these techniques or approaches. Activation is a highly personal process, and if your higher self leads you to undertake these approaches, then do so by all means. But also remember that the complexity can mislead. It can create a separation from your spiritual understanding that lives ever present in your heart. What matters is not how much we know about the spiritual techniques of the so-called masters, or even how well we exercise this knowledge. What matters is our ability to love and to express this love into the finest grain realities in our life.